It's okay.
Okay.
I needed it closer anyhow.
There you go. Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the imho.love show. I'm Lou Angelwolf. Sitting right next to me, it's my partner, Michael Murburg.
Hola, pobrecitos.
Good
¿Qué
to
pasa? You're listening. You're here. That's good.
That's right. Oh, very nice. Welcome to the imho.love show. IMHO is, in my humble opinion, like most of this stuff is. And this is our opinion. You're welcome to share your opinion. Should we leave the phone lines open tonight?
Sure, why not? We need another crackhead to call us and
hey, dude, no more. The mumbling lady, if she shows up again, okay, I'll beat you. All right. And you know it. Okay. Anyway, so yeah, we're going to open up the phone lines here on Tan Talk. It's tantalk1340.com, and which is probably the best way to watch the show. We're also live on Facebook right now. Facebook Live. Hi, all my Facebook pals. Leroy Spooner. And so we're going to have the show. We'll do a call-in show tonight. 727-441-3000. That's 727-441-3000 here in the local metro Clearwater, Tampa, St. Petersburg area.
And if you're in any way affiliated with Media Watch or APAC, please save your comments till the end of the show.
Media Watch and APAC.
Right.
Save your comments to the end.
Right.
Okay. All right. Cool. Are we going to be rubbing up against them?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, anyway, folks, we have a very interesting show lined up for you. And I was very, very grateful to have a little extra time to be able to really do some, not in-depth research, but enough to speak, intelligently about all this. One of the things that Michael and I talk about in our spare time is we just notice this constant fraying of people's personalities. And I think what it is there's way too much media involved. People are constantly you're constantly walking through Wi-Fi waves. You're being assaulted on a lot of different levels. Everything you see on the TV, everything you hear on the radio, most everything except our show, maybe even our show, is kind of meant to move you. You're being constantly manipulated, and it's absolutely exhausting. Well, one of the things that we noticed that when you take a whole combination of these things, you really, really can wear yourself down. And a lot of people get depressed. A lot of people develop bad habits because they don't know how to cope. But what I'm here to tell you is I'm feeling it too, okay? If you feel a little defeated, if you feel like, man, why am I doing all this? Why am I running through this maze again today? I can tell you that you're not alone, brother. You're not alone, sister, because this whole thing is a huge orchestration. And Michael and I, in our studies and in our meditations, we're trying to take it apart little piece by little piece. And the one thing that is a constant in all of our lives, unless you're just some incredible guru that can live on air and love, is you got to deal with money. You have to deal with money. Money's part of your thing. I've been really blessed the last few years. I've had a good, stable job that pays okay, and I've been able to make my bills, and life is okay. And it's a lot easier to deal with things when you reach in your wallet and just take care of it. Lord knows in the past, I've certainly had money struggles, starving artist for many years, feast and famine,
the dollar greases a lot of wheels.
It sure does. McDonald's on Monday, steaks on Saturday. It was whatever. I mean, I went through a lot of manipulations, but I tell you what, and you wonder why you can't get ahead. We're going to lay some of that out for you today because we have a couple of factors other than greed. Greed is the thing, though. Greed's the thing that undoes all of this.
Greed is a function of people that have egos that are never settled or satisfied or at peace, because they're so lacking in their spiritual development and souls. Is they constantly need layers and layers of protection to keep their egos intact. Now, when you get rid of the ego, you get rid of all those layers of protection that are necessary, and then you get rid of a good many of your problems.
Yeah, well, and that's exactly true. And part of our search here on imho.love, where we study the HICE, the human initiated celestial encounters, or
Contact
experiences.
You can put whatever you want in there. That's what I like about
C,
HICE, because
yeah.
it all matches.
It all fits.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it all fits.
It all fits. And we are seeking nice levels of truth for ourselves, and I'm willing to take something out of my psyche, something that I've believed or thought about for years on end, and I'm willing to take it apart and see if it still fits, see if it still works. And if it doesn't, I'm really willing to discard it.
Right.
I am willing to make changes in myself, and I know I have made quite a few. A lot of times, man, I just been, a pinball bouncing off the cushions and without a whole lot of direction, getting pushed around. But I can tell you, these days I have a little more direction. I understand a lot more about me, and I'm still confused by that as well. Don't get me wrong. But this is a time for introspection. And for those of you who are listening, watching the show, hello, Luke, my buddy over there. And hi, Beverly Haskins. Good to see you again. And as we dismantle our ego, you get more and more to the core of yourself. And to circle back around, part of your ego is how you handle money. It's how you display it. It's how you, are you generous? Are you tight? Are you careless? Are you, over controlling? You've got to analyze that. But one of the things that we want to tell you tonight is that don't feel bad if it feels very elusive. I got a few $1,000s in a savings account that's drawing 0.25% interest.
Yeah, well, the actual rate of inflation is somewhere around 3.5% or higher right now.
Yeah. So it actually is costing me money to leave money sitting there.
Right. Well, you realize that 2 years ago, they were charging people to keep money in the bank, negative interest. And negative interest has come up once again now that the Fed has found out that it really can't control anything with the interest rates anymore. And we'll get into that in a little while.
Well, the reason is because there's so much damn money printed already.
Yeah, and the only thing they can do is do another quantitative easing, and they're going to print more money, which is going to further erode the savings of American people and make housing and what was known as the American way of life out of reach for most of the people that are being born today.
Yeah, it's like I said, and hence the confusion. So imho.love, folks, welcome aboard, and here we go. This is a little basic story about the Khazars.
Yes, once upon a time, there was a land called Khazaria.
Khazaria. Do you say Khazars or Khazars?
I pronounce it Khazaria.
Khazaria?
Khazars or Khazars is
okay.
Either one is okay.
It's acceptable. Okay. And we're talking about 550 AD, 630 AD, real integral times there. And
yeah, it was a time where the Turks, as a group, were made up of a bunch of multi-ethnic personages that eventually came to unite in Khanates. That's before the Muslims and Caliphates, but that's exactly where the Khazars came from.
Okay, the Khazars, and they not only predate Islam. Okay. But 630 AD, which was part of their exodus, the Quran was written in 625. And there's also information that the Khazars were part of the Jesuits. They'd grown some Jesuit influence, which also had a lot of influence on the writing of the Quran. So yeah, really interesting.
Not surprising.
Yeah, I'm going to chase that rabbit. I'm going to chase that rabbit.
Yeah, well, we actually see today where the Pope is making overtures to Islam to create a single religion again. It was
Mhm.
like, I don't think we need religions anyway,
Right.
because if you live a righteous life, a good life of simplicity, patience, and compassion, you don't need anything else.
That's right. You don't need circumstance. You don't need a building to go to. You don't need a guy in a fish hat.
Or
You don't.
circumcisions.
Speaking
Speaking of
that's the one thing I got to tell you, and I've been blessed. I had a very, very compassionate mother, and she gave me a pass on all that. She goes, the little guy just got here. I don't understand why in his first 7 days of life he has to experience excruciating pain. Okay.
Yeah, it was the only time in my life my knees buckled is when I watched my son being held down by a moil and his moilizers, and having his little winker snipped.
I know. I had the same thing, same experience. I was very opposed to it, but I was so tired of fighting about it, I just gave in.
Right.
And I'm sorry, son.
And then, sorry, you got no place to put your chewing gum. All joke, sorry.
Anyway, but that is one thing that I never understood. The religious people of the world, they go, look at man in all his perfection, his mind, his hand, his heart, his lungs, his legs. Oh, what a divine creation. Except for this little thing right here. Except for this little hangy thing here. This hangy thing has got to go. This is the detailing that we're going to change.
Yeah, I wonder how that came about. It's kind of like, okay, pull down your pants. The guys who are circumcised, you live. The guys who are not circumcised, you're not a member of the tribe. You got to go.
Well, it wasn't. Yeah, and I don't believe it was a live or die situation by that. And from what I understand, I went to Israel in '99 and I did some studying over there, and I got a little Hebrew studies behind me. But from what I understand, they said it was for an easier life in the desert. That it was a cleaner way to live with that type of equipment.
That's after the scars had healed.
Oh yeah, yeah. Time heals everything, but the thing that I never understand is why you would rob somebody of that joy. The big difference is like, keep your hand in a glove every day, and then when you're very sensitive,
right?
You rub your hand against.
Well, there's still tribes that do clitorectomies. They cut the clitoris away from the female's genitalia so that she doesn't have sexual pleasure anymore, and that seems to be okay with some people. And I don't see any. I don't see any rational thought in that.
Wow. Well, here we are in genital mutilations early on in the show.
Hey,
but anyway, again, and like I said, I never understood that. I never understood the validity of it, and it still doesn't have any with me. But again, this is an idea that got passed down. A bunch of people believed it, so they let it be. And we're gonna we start to explain the Khazars. This was a group of people. They came out of what they call Tengri shamanism. That was their faith back then, and most shaman type faiths they're usually praying to some sort of divine being, a lesser god, and he's imbued with all these extra powers and energies and all this. And it's a little sect. It's a little mind.
Yeah, didn't
cult.
They kind of like worship snakes or something like that?
Well, they called themselves the Serpent People.
Okay.
Okay, and they identified with Lucifer. So hence calling themselves the Snake People or the Serpent People wasn't a big stretch for them. But anyway, so here they are, and now you tell an interesting story of when they, as a group, they were kicked out of Turkey.
Right. And they ended up forming Khazaria, which
I wonder how many people you're talking about.
Oh, geez. I don't know. I'd have to go back to the books again.
Hundreds of thousands, you think?
But enough so that they could raise armies and wreak havoc upon the native Slav populations that lived between the Sea of Azov and the Caspian and the lands north of there, to the point where after 200 years, the Russian Tsar came in and said, okay, tired of you beating up and killing and taking people for child sacrifice, things like that. That's what they were accused of. And you have to choose a religion. So you can choose Islam, you can choose Judaism, or you can choose Christianity. Make your choice. And the what was his name? King Bulan.
Bulan,
the hart, the elk. We're talking about people that would call their king stuff like the elk.
He's the
It's
elk.
like he's the grand poobah. He's the elk. The elk is going to speak to you. It's like, come on, these are people coming really out of very primitive thought processes, who aren't well educated or even irrational, and they're still engaging in human sacrifice as part of a religious rite. And eventually, the Russian Tsar said, "The hell with it. No, you got to pick a religion." They picked Judaism as their front. Said, "Okay, call us Jews. We're okay with that now. Just now leave us alone." And that began the blood feud between the Khazars and the Russian Tsardom. And it's continuing on today through all these centuries, and the way the American government is treating the Russians and the Russian government right now. And Russia has always been the grudge match since then, and it's also always been the prize for the banking empire that started under the Khazarian mafia in the 17th and 18th century.
Wow. Okay. So we'll just keep it. And for those of you who don't know, folks, Michael has a degree in history from Princeton. So he's a pretty good student. In case you're wondering who's talking to you and who's telling you what, this is the guy that's done his studying, and he knows a lot of this stuff off the top of his head. Now me, I've been peaked but I know I got some dots connecting here, and it's very interesting.
Well, let me just interject before your dots. Okay, the issue that I also the child sacrifice and the bloodletting and the blood drinking are also part of what we see in the Hollywood sects today, with the issue of child kidnapping and the whole adrenochrome junkies that we read about in the darker press releases that that I believe are true.
Sure. And for those of you who don't know, and I'm sorry to be the one to share this with you, there's a group of people out there, usually the very wealthy. They have an adrenochrome addiction, which is they drink the blood of children. And supposedly it gives you this like wild sensation, and and they think it's their fountain of youth, that kind of a thing. And I can't even really believe it exists, and that's the problem. See, a lot of this stuff gets written off as conspiracy theory and this and that and the other thing, because the average person can't go, yeah, I can see that happening. The average person can't see that happening.
Right. You and I hung out in some pretty dark places many years ago.
Yes.
So, and it didn't surprise us that the human sacrifices go on in at least one of the major motorcycle gangs in this country.
Absolutely.
And when you wonder, where did that dancer disappear to, or where did, and the same thing is possible to happen to children. And because we've been and seen the dark side, we know that this stuff not only can exist, but it actually does.
And it's just amazing what some people won't stop to believe, and a lot of people think that about us. Like, oh, look, those guys believe. But here, saying that, you get these little subcultures, gang mentalities, and stuff like that, and people start being treated as property, even sometimes having tattoos stating as much as their property and their owner, and what happens when you get into that zealothood, no matter what level, what side you're shooting from, some really, really strange stuff happens. And there still is human sacrifice. I mean, it's as old as, it's Old Testament stuff. It's that was the prophets of Baal and all their sacrifices.
Right, and we've also seen groups of human beings were in, especially the outlaw biker group and some of those other ones, the Hell's Angels, where murder is an accepted practice, where
Right.
it's okay. It's okay to murder as long as you're told to do it, and it's some guy that deserved it because he was a member of some other gang.
Right, and it's real interesting too. I mean, I've studied that. We can go to that edge better once.
I want to go to your dots though.
My dots. Okay. Now you go, okay, our banking structure is inherently crooked, and the average schmo can't seem to get along. The average schmo pays interest. He doesn't get the fullness of his money, of his wage.
Right. Okay. And the same thing happens with governments. It's like you have $100 and you're the government and I give it to you and you say you give it back, but I got to give you 10% first so I can use my own money.
Yeah, that never ending VIG. Okay. It'll make you broke. It really will, even though it's only at 10%, but at 10% on every move is a lot.
Right. Back when I was a prosecutor many years ago, 30 years ago, usury used to be anything above 20%. It was a crime.
Right.
That you get prosecuted for. Right. Only the mafia did stuff like that.
Right.
Today, Bank of America, Capital One, everybody's got rates as high as 29.8%.
These car loans, 36%.
Wow.
Yeah.
No wonder there's a potential $1 trillion default in the high risk car loans.
Yeah, exactly. Well, here's the other thing with car loans. You have people paying on their second and third negative equity accumulation. They have negative equity in their last two vehicles, and they traded them anyway. And they took the negative equity and stuck it on the new note. Okay, they're 2 cars deep now. They're still paying on a car that they haven't had for 2 years,
and still paying comp and collision on the car that they would have been able to skirt on if they had been able to pay cash or a loan at 3 or 4 or 5%.
Sure. And I feel bad for people. They get coerced into it, and but they just didn't do their research. They didn't do their study. They don't realize that monthly payment might be the number you're thinking that you can afford, but you have to look at the total deferred price of what it is that you're paying. If you're paying 40% too much for the vehicle to start with, and the loan is 25% longer than it should be, just because they hit your number doesn't mean you got a deal.
Right. And that's where we come to the Babylonian money magic, going back into the Khazars. We could talk about that too, because the whole system is based on number one, paper money, and fractional reserve banking, which means all you need to do is keep 10% back of 100% of the 100% of the money you loan out. So every bank is potentially set for a run. And if it wasn't for the Federal Reserve, which is a private corporation that loans us the money, if there's a run on the bank, then the Federal Reserve just prints it.
Yes.
And then the banks are, and then we are stuck on the note, just like we were under the Bush administration coming out of the last couple of years there into Obama.
Yeah, we can't. We have the machines to print the money, but we don't orchestrate it. The Federal Reserve orchestrates it.
And it's, privately owned corporation owned by undetermined owners of international origin.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, we're about to tell you about who one of those is.
Okay.
Back in 1567, I think, Mayor Amschel Bauer.
Mr. Bauer.
Okay, was a very, very wealthy banker at that time, and he was a German descent, and he became so enamored with the Star of David, the 2 triangles, the 666 points, all that.
He was a Khazarian who moved to Germany and became a German.
Oh, okay.
So he was a
grafted
Khazarian
into Germany.
Yeah, and an Ashkenazi, we call Ashkenazi Jews. Now, this is a highly debated topic among Jewry, but if you look at the facts, it's pretty clear that Meyer Bauer was a Khazarian, and I believe it's not only provable by his ancestry, but by what he did afterwards.
Okay. Yes. And what he did afterward, one of the first things he did is he changed his name. Okay. And because of the power that he saw within that six-pointed star or whatever, he chose the name Rothschild. When red, Roth is red, and Shield is shield, the red shield. And when you look at that, that was a huge marketing ploy. Okay, because people knew more about what your name meant back then. You know, if you were Bob Fisher, chances are you had a boat, and so Rothschild starts his banking, his whole banking dynasty, and they had 12 major banking settings, and
well, he had 5 sons, and each one of them was given a territory to take over. And then there were, I believe, there were 12 people altogether in the original cadre that created the modern European private banking system that's still in its existence today, and that rules the United Kingdom, the United States, and actually is in Japan as well.
Right. Okay. All right. So here you go. Okay, you've got this guy posing as a Jew, and I want to say this to the people that are listening: these are not nice Jews.
These weren't religious Jews.
These aren't religious Jews. These are people masquerading as Jews. Okay, one of the nicest human beings I've ever met in my existence on earth was a Torah scribe that I met in Israel in 1999. I never met a guy with such divine countenance. He was the most peaceful dude I ever met in my life. He literally radiated peace and serenity. I got to have lunch with he and his family, and his children were beautiful and respectful, and it was like a little segment of a dream. And I'm not talking about that type of a Jewish person where you're living by the commandments, you're studying the Torah, you're being observant, you're keeping kosher, you're doing what you're doing the best that you can do to follow what you believe. That's not the people we're talking about.
Right. Well, essentially, Meyer Bauer was ascribed to Babylonian Talmudism, which is a satanic hybrid and an offshoot of Judaism, and is not part of the religion in proper.
Right. It's exactly true. So these are the guys that run the banks, okay? And they have found, and what was the thing? We're about to go to break here. I got 1 minute left. What was we'll leave on this is always funny. When the Khazarians came into their area, they were given land, right?
Oh yes, you can get this from Alexander Solzhenitsyn's 200 Years of Coexistence. What had happened is the Khazarian Jews became a problem in Russia because they had been dispersed, and they refused to do military service, and there were a whole bunch of laws that were actually punitive in nature against them. And I believe it was Alexander the First who decided that, yeah, okay, we're going to change this. And what we're going to do is, number one, we're going to try and take these people that do not engage in legitimate occupations and try to give them the opportunity to make an honest living as farmers. Go figure.
Wow. Okay.
Right. Oi, a twister. What are we going to do with this cause here?
We're going to leave it right there. We got to go to break. So we've got the Khazarians being set up as farmers. We'll be back in 6 minutes, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening to IMHO. I'm Lou Angelwolf. That's Michael Murburg. We'll be back in just a little bit.
WTAN, Clearwater.
FM 106.1.
WDCF, Dade City.
FM 102.3.
WZHR, Zephyr Hills.
FM 104.3.
Listen.
Special counsel Robert Mueller spoke publicly about his investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election. But as Mueller marked his last day in his position, Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell says there are questions he needs to answer.
What Special Counsel Mueller did not say in his report is critical, which is after 200 pages of contacts between the Russians and the Trumps that he laid out, he never said these relationships ended. And that's what is really at stake. Are there ongoing threats to our country because the president and his team are still in contact with the Russians who are determined to attack us?
Hillary Clinton addressed Hunter College graduates shortly after Mueller made his comments about the Russia probe, saying what we've seen from the Trump administration is a complete refusal to condemn a foreign power who attacked our democracy. Israel will be holding new elections again this year after its parliament voted to dissolve itself. Correspondent Oren Lieberman says this is unprecedented.
Never before in Israel's history has a prime minister failed to put together a new government after an election, but that's exactly what happened to Benjamin Netanyahu as he came up against the deadline to put together a government.
Nearly 40 million people bracing for the risk of severe weather tonight. As correspondent Ed Levendera tells us, people living near the Keystone Dam have been told to be ready for the worst-case scenario.
And it all really focuses on the Keystone Dam, the floodgates there, and coming out of that dam is 3 Olympic-sized pools of water every second, and that is what is causing much of the flooding in eastern Oklahoma and Arkansas.
A body believed to be that of a missing 5-year-old Utah girl was found today less than a block from her home. That brings the search for Elizabeth Shelley to a sad close 5 days after the child was taken from her home. Authorities have charged the girl's 21-year-old uncle with her murder. I'm Barbara Cusack.
Life is lived by moving forward, seizing the open road, embracing what's ahead. It's why we created Ford Pass. Everything you need to keep forging ahead in one app, right in the palm of your hand. Only Ford Pass combines roadside assistance, Ford Pass rewards, and now when you buy or lease a new Ford, earn points you can use toward flexible complimentary maintenance. Ford Pass, built to keep you moving. Built Ford proud. Visit your participating Ford dealership to find out about earning points for flexible complimentary maintenance when you buy or lease a new Ford and sign up for rewards.
Roadside assistance is included for certain Ford owners and available to everyone for a per-service fee. Ford reserves the right to change program details without obligations. Visit your participating dealer or FordPassRewards.com for program rules and restrictions. Ford Pass, compatible with select smartphone platforms, is available via download.
Hello out there. Tune in every Saturday at noon on Tan Talk or Connecting Caregivers with me, Linda Burhans, the gal who cares for the caregivers. Every Saturday at noon, we will find resources, education, and a shoulder for the caregivers. I know it's tough, but we can work it out together. Look forward to you tuning in on Saturdays at noon, where you'll have tons of information. Linda Burhans, the gal who cares for the caregiver.
Hey everybody, it's Bad Craig, host of Blazing Cigars, sponsored by Island Lifestyle and Tobacco Depot. Blazing Cigars is Tampa Bay's only true cigar lifestyle radio show. We feature the latest in cigar industry news, current trends, and cigar tips. Also, interviews with different cigar manufacturers from around the country. And of course, I'm always looking for my next ex-wife. So join us every Saturday from 11 a.m. to noon. That's Blazing Cigars right here on the Tan Talk Radio Network. Again, Blazing Cigars right here on the Tan Talk Radio Network.
If you would like to become a wholesale buyer of the premium quality longevity product that you hear about right here on the Tan Talk Radio Network, for personal service, you can pick up the phone right now and call Lola at 727-441-3311. Again, that's Lola at 727-441-3311. Or for even faster service, log on to tantalkhealth.com. That's tantalkhealth.com. Here's to your health and longevity.
Let's go bowling!
Let's Go Bowling, heard on the Tan Talk Radio Network every Wednesday, 11 a.m. to 12 Eastern Time. Sponsored by 12 Strike and Innovative Ball Spinner. If you bowl, if you haven't bowled in a while, or if you never bowled, why don't you be one of 65 million people have bowled last year? Listen to the tip of the week. Bowling stars, old and new. Let's Go Bowling Show, gobowlingshow.com.
Go yard is a metaphor used in baseball, meaning to hit a home run. Life struggles can make you feel like you just struck out. It's times like these that we need a little batting practice to pick ourselves back up and get back in the game. Whether you are dealing with marital issues, drug addiction, rebellious teens, anxiety, depression, or just generally having a bad day, call Mama Mac. If life has you down 0-2, before you strike out, learn to go yard. Go yard with Mama Mac on this radio station, Thursdays, 6 o'clock.
There's only one place on the radio where golfers like you can turn for the best tips, interviews, product reviews, local tournaments, and everything golf talk. The Golf Show, guys.
Hey, join the Golf Show, guys, every Wednesday morning from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. It's not just funny, it's informative, it's celebrities, and it's a lot of applause. It's the Golf Show, guys, Wednesday mornings from 9 to 10 a.m. right here on the Tan Talk Radio Network.
Don't turn it off now. You need this stuff. Tampa Bay's Tan Talk Radio Network.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back. It's imho.love, in my humble opinion, .love. I'm Lou Angelwolf here with Michael Murburg, and we are studying a little history of the banking system, which is going way back to the Khazars, and we're talking early 1700s now. Let's
yeah, and we're
talking
Russia 1700s into mid 1700s into the 1800s.
Now here's this group of people that have moved into Russia they've been there several hundred years now, and they are kind of living outside the law. They're a rebellious group,
and they're problematic and very intelligent people, and they were gaming other people and taking advantage of those less intelligent.
Oh, I hate pikeys. Anyway, so they're working along doing their business, and they got a very interesting story you told me a couple of weeks ago. They were issued land from the
Tsar gave them his land.
The Tsar gave them
to settle and to farm, and so that they could establish themselves as a hardworking citizenry and assimilate and become Russian citizens, good Russian citizens.
But what did they do with that land?
Well, what any smart Jew would do. It was like they took the land, they rented it out to the serfs, they got money for the rental, and then they bought the crops from the serfs, and then they started their own granaries, and then after the granaries, they started their own distilleries. So they ended up running granaries and distilleries and renting out their land and becoming very wealthy.
And poisoning the people that were doing their work.
Right. Feeding them, selling the grain back to them at a profit, kind of like the Federal Reserve.
Sure.
And then selling them liquor and keeping them drunk enough not to understand what money was all about.
There is that amazing business edict that I never got. I'm too much of a Boy Scout when it comes to, you bought that? Is it worth that? Is it good? It's worth it? You like it? Okay, pay me. I'll shake your hand and give it to you.
Yeah,
that's the guy. I don't know how to do these end arounds. I don't know how to sting the guy. But that's the one thing that all these uber successful banking institutes is they know how to get paid on both ends. They know how to get paid by the winners. They know how to get paid by the losers. And it's an amazing business form, but I mean, highly unethical. And see, that's why I'm saying, like in the Torah, when you study the Torah, it tells you to let your weights and measures be true. If you say there is this is a full ephah right here, it should be a full ephah. It shouldn't be most of an ephah with some ephah filler in the bottom. It should be a full ephah. And that's what I'm saying. These are not those Jews that we'll call them Zionists because that's the way they evolved into.
Right.
Okay. So
along with the same 6 star, which, some would call it the Star of David, and very well maybe, but it was also another sign of the Babylonian Talmud and the satanic influence with the 666, the 6-sided star. that's just a fact. However you read it is your own business. But, what we have today as the blue star of Israel has its roots somewhere in there, and take it for what it's worth.
And all these symbols have been used over and over again. The swastika was from, I knew it when I was forming the sentence. It's Egyptian.
Was it Egyptian or Mayan?
No.
Okay.
Assyrian? I don't know.
Yeah, it's irrelevant. Hitler just turned it backwards.
Well, it's the ancient Aryans,
right?
Okay, which is what the whole Aryan nation.
Well, and actually, that brings us to where the early the Habaru were Aryans that came ashore in Israel in prehistoric times at Haifa, and ended up conquering through war and wiping out populations the entirety of what is modern Israel today, or close to modern Israel today.
Yeah.
So these are people that came from elsewhere to begin with, to wipe out the indigenous people that were already there.
Yeah, and they're getting very close to completing that.
Yeah, 10,000 years later.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. As this banking manipulation has happened throughout the years, these guys go in and they go into a country and they say, "Hey, look, we're here to help you out. These are the bankers." They show up and they go, "Well, we can forward you this much money, but we need you to build this kind of a plant, that kind of a factory, this kind of a processor, and go ahead
and use our companies."
And they give them the money that they promised, or they meter out most of it.
Yeah, they never get it. It goes on paper and it gets paid out to the corporations that are in with the banks and the governments, the American government in particular, that builds their infrastructure that they don't really need and can't pay for.
And then when the note comes due about this agreement that they've set forth, the only way to pay the debt is to give up your natural resources. The things that they wanted when they first got there, they just set up this shell game to wind up with your stuff.
Not only natural resources, but infrastructure too. It's kind of like, we would like your sewers and water reserves. So you like to poop and you like to drink water, don't you?
Yeah.
Well, we'll forgive a certain amount of the debt if you just sign these public companies over to our private corporations here, and then we'll start, figuring out how to milk you that way.
Yes. Then, and really, what this is, you can break it all down. This is the amplification of usury in its highest levels, because usury, according to the Torah, it's not something you're supposed to do. And I don't know exactly where this phrase came from, but it was "be a lender nor a borrower be."
It's Shakespeare.
Is that Shakespeare?
Yeah, you're quoting Shakespeare.
Okay.
What's happening to you, Lou?
I don't know. And so now you have these centuries and centuries and centuries of usury happening, and people that can't pay their bills, people that get eaten up by the agreements that they made. There's a car being repossessed right now. And if you hang on for the end of the next sentence, there's another car being repossessed right now, because people entered into agreements they did not understand. Why? Maybe it was their personal ego or their drive that they needed to drive something better or whatever, because there's other avenues that you can get your mission accomplished. You don't have to go out there and plop down whatever and take the longest term payment to buy some cheesy car that literally comes apart before the note's due. You can save up. You can buy a decent used car and keep it on the road and treat it nice and drive it gently, like you have to make it last. Like you should do everything, like your relationships. You should treat them gently because they have to last. Don't, and just don't go in with all this top heavy unresearched information, and you'll be a lot better off. I mean, I know a lot of people that, like we were talking about before, I mean, they're in terrible business agreements with their car, some with their mortgage. It's all, just remember, there's always somebody out there a little smarter than you. And a lot of times the best thing to do is nothing. And there are ways. It takes discipline to save up money and buy a cash car and keep it on the road. You have to pay attention. You've not yet earned the elegance of buying a brand new car, keys in the garage, I spark it up, I go. But you pay for that. That's a premium when you look at what you pay for that service.
Yeah, it's kind of if digressing a little bit, there was a point in time about 20 years ago when the highest concentration per square mile of millionaires anywhere in America was Port Richey, Florida. Okay.
That is something else. You've told me that before, and I find it hard to believe.
Yeah, it's true. It was true. I don't know if it's true any longer, but they also found too, essentially the same time. I read an article and said, the preferred car of the American millionaire at the time was a 4 to 5 year old Crown Victoria. Go figure.
Well, that makes, now I know from a gearhead point of view, I totally get that.
Right.
Whether you had the Crown Victoria with the 5-liter. Okay, bulletproof motor. They ran great
forever.
Yeah, or if you were got something even a little newer with a 4.6 or a 5.4, again, same thing. Why do you think the cops drive them? They idle, they run, they go, they go, they go. They just go. They keep going.
Yeah, and then I think other people today drive in the same ilk drive Toyotas.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, no
Toyota or Nissan.
Or Nissan. No reason to be no reason to be extravagant. Just
get there.
Just get there. Basic needs.
Get there safe. Get there with the air conditioning on.
Yeah, I had my father-in-law. Was a conservative Jew, and God rest his soul. I love the man. He was also a test pilot during World War II, which was kind of funny. He goes, "Yeah, what they'd do is they'd say, 'Hey, it doesn't fly. Let's see if it will.' Put the Jew behind it."
Oh my God! Really? Wow.
Yeah. So he was like, he could test all the reconstructed B-17s, B-24s, fighter pilots, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. But amazing man, millionaire in his own right, invented the baby butler in the 50s, which put him into a very high income caliber. And I worked for him for a while. I worked in his factories. And in his factory, putting furniture together and delivering it. And he used to drive a beat-up old Nissan, right? And he'd work every day in a pair of khaki pants and T-shirts. You always see him out there working. Okay, sure. We're multi-millionaire. He's always working. I go like, Maury, you got all the money in the world. Why are you driving an 8-year-old Nissan without air conditioning? He go, Michael, it's a machine. It gets me to work. It gets me home. What more do I need? And he was like, I adopted that philosophy for the rest of my life.
That's a beautiful way to look at it.
Absolutely.
It really is.
Absolutely.
Okay. The point I was trying to make before when I mentioned the Torah was the Torah also tells you don't need any attaching doctrine to understand this message from our Creator, they say. It does take study and prayer and meditation, but it tells you not to accept any other documentation. And the Talmud, which is a commentary on the Torah, which there's some odd things in there, and really what it is, an amalgamation of all the rabbis and all the deep thinkers that, I don't know, validated their space. I don't know, validated their time here on Eretz. So, there's just a lot of bent up information here. And like we said, we're not Jew bashing. We're not, being anti-Semitic in any way. We have the utmost respect for somebody.
And love. We're trying to get some facts out there so people understand why things are happening the way they're happening now and how they got this way.
And a lot of it is the manipulation and the greed from the banks. And this is going on for centuries now. Okay, and we're going to speed up here to, the Titanic. Okay.
Yes.
Or is this the turn of the ninth? It's 1912.
It's 1912, yes. And let me kind of set the stage a little bit here. The Titanic had three very influential bankers who were against the Fed. Now, those of you
The
who
Federal
are-
Reserve System.
the Federal Reserve System. Now, under part of the blood oath of the Khazarians to take revenge against Russia was because Russia helped the America in the war against Great Britain. America was not supposed to win, and the Rothschilds had already been heavily invested in the stock and stock market and in the banks in Great Britain. As a matter of fact, after the revolution, they essentially bought Alexander Hamilton, who helped found the first bank of the U.S., if I'm not mistaken. But which was the first of the Rothschild banks in the United States. It failed. And it wasn't until Andrew Jackson came along where the second bank of the United States tried to get a charter and start again, which was they're not banks of the United States. These are private banks with the name Bank of the United States. They changed that with the Federal Reserve System. That failed. And then under Lincoln fought the bankers as well, the international bankers as well, and he was assassinated because of it. And the ties of John Wilkes Booth to the different groups here in the United States that are associated with the international banking cartel are there. They're historical fact. And then you get Woodrow Wilson coming around.
Now we're up to 1910 now.
Yeah, 1910. And then you have the debacle at Jekyll Island, and you have the bankers get together, and they want to bring the United States, or they want the Federal Reserve System. And as a consequence, there were some bankers. Let me note. There were David Astor. Everybody knows the Astor Hotel.
Mm-hmm.
There was Benjamin Guggenheim. We all know the Guggenheim Museum in New York. I mean, these are great names. And Isidore Straus. They were very wealthy bankers in the United States that opposed the Federal Reserve System. And lo and behold, the Titanic sinks and they all die.
That is really amazing.
It's, it could be chance, but something, we're talking about a group of people, the Khazarian mafia, that were into an Operation Gladio sort of false flag operation from the very beginning. And you can take it, all the way from there from the Titanic till the sinking of the Lusitania. Mm-hmm. I mean, what happened to bring us into the war was the trade-off between the Federal Reserve System and the British bankers who needed the United States to come into the war to defeat Germany, so they could profit further and not lose or risk, what they had in England at the time.
Yes. Okay. So now President Woodrow Wilson is the one that finally concedes and gives in, because there was a run on the banks in 1907. Everybody was miserable. They couldn't get their money. A lot of banks failed at that time. So the big governing power of the Federal Reserve Bank, okay, which is run by these Zionist bankers, okay, and everybody knew it, and there were so many people in vehement opposition, and I believe this all happened like on Christmas week.
Well, yeah, it was Christmas Eve, and they took the vote, and to this day, I don't believe that there was enough votes yay to pass the measure. But the measure passed when most of Congress was at home, and they weren't there to vote for it. It was Christmas Eve. And matter of fact, Woodrow Wilson on his deathbed said, passing the Federal Reserve Act was the worst mistake that I made during my presidency. And that even eclipses his entrance, the United States entrance into World War I.
Yes.
With millions dead.
Yeah. Well, okay, and I get that. I mean, one is one, but the other one is just phenomenal. Okay. So now we've entered into the Federal Reserve banking, and supposedly they're supposed to take care of everything. We're never going to have a run on the banks again. That was their guarantee. And just to let you know, the largest bill that was ever minted was a $100,000 bill by our Treasury. And who was on that? Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson was the figurehead on the $100,000 bill. They only had like 4 or 5 of them in circulation.
Yeah, and they want to take the face off of the Jackson now, Jackson's face off of the 20, and put Tubman's
Harriet Tubman.
Harriet Tubman's. So we're going from a guy who shot down the Second National Bank to a slave.
Yeah.
I mean, how prosaic, how is that for a vision?
It's so twisted. It's anyway, that's a show unto itself. But anyway, okay. And the one thing that once the bankers got that close to every politician, okay, things really, really started to change. In fact, this was an interesting quote. There's a guy out there called Harold Rosenthal. You may want. He's easy to Google, and I've known about this for a long time. He has some great quotes. He says, "Americans have not had a presidential choice since 1932. Roosevelt was our man, and every president since Roosevelt has been our man." And Rosenthal, totally in with the banking system, totally knew exactly what he was talking about. And that's why I tell my friends, I love you. My God, if you need a kidney, call me. I'll see if I can test and give you one of mine. But to argue partisan politics, man, what an extreme waste of time. You need to direct your energies in other places. But okay, so we've got a new controlling system of our money around the turn of the century, and things aren't going well. And there's a lot of people really bucking this system. There was another senator, actually our House of Representatives, a guy named Louis McFadden, who was in office from 1915 to 1935. He was a very vocal critic of the Federal Reserve Bank. He was telling everybody that we needed to get out of this. We needed to return to our own banking system. We have new competent guys that can do it. And mysteriously, after he's 60 years old, goes to a cocktail party in New York City a year after he's been out of office and gets poisoned and dies of poisoning. So apparently they needed him to be quiet.
Yeah, go figure.
Okay. So, and just the money keeps marching on. And what they've done is they've created a huge desire for materialism. Okay. They've made us all think that you have to borrow, you have to get, you're going to, thanks. You're going to have to borrow, you're going to have to get, because the guy over there has it.
That was the big change with the Khazarians and the Khazarian mafia, which is essentially the Khazarian king in the inner court as it continued to evolve over history and time. But Judaism is a very spiritual religion, and then what happened is with the Khazarians, there was a change towards a tendency towards nationalism in the 19th century and towards materialism. The people that started this, for example, Herzl was a non-religious Jew.
Yes,
was one of the initiators of Zionism. This is a national movement that was consecrated by the death of so many Jews under Hitler, whether they were extermination chambers or not. That's a whole nother issue to be debated intelligently without being labeled an anti-Semite, because the historical facts are historical facts. But the religion where Jews became subservient to were subservient to the Almighty became a movement where Jews would be subservient to a national state and materialism as a way of life.
There you go. Well, we're under a minute left to go. Michael, what a great show. We never got around to the whole thing, but we'll be here next week. I'm on vacation. I'm actually out of town next week. So we can either do a rerun or whatever you feel like doing.
Let's do a rerun. I can catch up I can catch up at the ranch and then have everything ready for the next CE5 on the 8th. So
Beautiful.
That would be good. We'll do a rerun.
All right. Well, Facebook, we won't be live next Wednesday, but you'll be able to catch something on YouTube, correct? Do you run the rerun on YouTube? No? Whatever. Okay. Well, we'll be off in the airwaves. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening to the imho.love show. I'm Lou Angelwolf. Hey, you know what we tell you all the time. Return to your innocence. Don't feel bad if you're confused by all this stuff. We're here with you. We're trying to sort it out with you. And be blessed, be peaceful. Call your mama.
Don't allow your religion to get hijacked. Don't get hijacked by religion, and just remember that bloodshed is an impediment to peace.
Amen. True story. Thanks for listening to the imho.love show.